Hey, it's Paul here from the Off the Comma podcast. And if you've been following the podcast, you already know that it's about amazing human beings sharing amazing stories about their experience with being stuck and getting unstuck. And you've probably wondered, hey, whatever happened to that guest? What's happened since they were on the show? So that's what this is all about. We are checking in with various podcast guests and just taking 15 minutes to see what's going on in their world. So, deeper connection, learning more about our guests, seeing how life unfolds for them. Enjoy this conversation, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, we are back with another one of our podcast, Off the Comma podcast guest check-ins. And for this quick conversation, we have Joe Smith, who was with us on episode 38. And so it's been, I didn't look up specifically, but it's been a handful of months or so since you were on. I know you were on earlier in the year, Joe. And, welcome back. And the whole point of this conversation is kind of catch us up. Tell us, what have you been up to? What have you been working on? And how are things going since you were on the show?
Hey Paul, it's good to be back. It's good to talk with you, even beforehand when we just chit chatted for a little bit, caught up. Yeah, well, a lot. There's always a ton going on. I guess if you're, like right now, what we're in the midst of right now is we are smack dab in the middle of uh planning for our city's big Pride Festival. That typically for us here in Gainesville and several other places too, we don't do the big Pride festivals like the all day festivals during June because it's so hot
Ooh,
and it's horrible. And here in Gainesville, we've got the University of Florida, so we want the students to be a part of it. So it usually happens in October. This year, because of a scheduling snafu on the city's end, it's the last weekend of September. It is what it is. But I mean, so that pushes us up a month. So we're like doing some of the fundraising and the grant writing and just got a grant this morning for the children's area so we can give away books and different stuff like that. So it is full on planning the big Pride Festival. So I mean, that takes up a ton of time.
yeah.
So
That is cool. Well, first of all, I have to acknowledge you all because as somebody who does go to Pride here in Sacramento in the summertime and it's sometimes 110 degrees, like thank you. Because I'm not one of those people who takes his shirt off and does the sun in the summer. But so thank you for that.
yeah.
But how cool is this? I don't have a lot of exposure with a lot of different cities or areas Pride festivals, but I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that there's very few pastors who are at the tip of the spear when it comes to the planning committees and activities.
Yes. Yes. There are a handful. I am not the only one. Um, as far as the planning and stuff goes, I guess I'm the only straight pastor.
Mm.
There's a
Boy,
few others that are involved. And I will say this, there have been a few others that have been involved in the past, right? And then they kind of rotate off the board or whatever. So it's not that there aren't any. But uh, none with my background. I can promise you that.
mm,
Yes. Yes.
that's cool.
So yeah.
And
Well,
you shared, and a little plug back for the podcast, the episode 38, right? You can go back if you haven't already listened to episode 38, and you can hear Joe's story. Joe talks about this and
yeah.
how he's gotten involved in this. So folks can go back and listen and hear that. I want to hear from you. Like, what are you most excited about for this year's Pride? What is something that you're looking forward to? What do you?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, the biggest thing for all of us is the fact that there's so much momentum this year. There's just so much more, like the last several years have been very, very heavy, right? Like it's just the MAGA politicians in Tallahassee. It was just win after win after win after win, seemingly, right? But then you've got like the Southern Poverty Law Center here has an office here, and Equality Florida, which is the big organization here in Florida, taking these laws, challenging these laws. There's these grassroots efforts. This past year alone, through Equality Florida, through the PTA, through Kaleidoscope PTA, there was a concentrated effort to send people to Tallahassee and to like email and phone call. And I can't remember how many thousands of people they said actually showed up at the Capitol and how many tens of thousands called and emailed. But this legislative session, there were 22 anti-LGBTQ laws proposed. 21 of them were defeated or completely neutralized, and only one made it through. And
Mm.
so, I mean, that in and of itself was just a massive victory. And we keep seeing these past laws being struck down or halted in the courts.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, not mitigating, the damage that was done during the waiting period, but this year it just really feels like it's almost a turning of the tide. And so, going into the Pride Festival, it was very like even the theme that was chosen this year that was voted on, Power and Pride, and it's a bright, colorful T-shirt, and there's just a ton of energy and momentum. And so, like on my end of it, part of my responsibilities, duties on the board is fundraising, and so going in and meeting with these business members, and there's just so much momentum going in and excitement around it of like, yes, come be a part of this because do you see what's happening? Like the state of Florida, the people do not agree with these extremist laws.
Mhm.
So you have an opportunity to be a part of like the right side of history. And so I think for us, that's the thing. Like this year's Pride is going to be last year's Pride was very much a protest.
Mhm.
It was called Can't Drag Us Down. It was very drag centric because of that's what the focus was last year. So it was very much a protest. This year it's still, I mean, Pride's a protest, right? But this year it's a celebration. It's gonna be a huge party.
Mm. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just like we're not counting, you're not counting our eggs yet, but we got to celebrate those small victories as they start rolling in. And so like this year, it just feels there's just a different feel to
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I love to hear that. And I love to hear, how significant and meaningful it is to you. And I'll take an opportunity to get my own little kind of shot in there too. Like you were talking about 22 anti-LGBTQ laws and all but one got shut down. Also to never forget that that very well could be the intent anyway, right? Like as long as they
Mhm.
get through that, it's not about them passing all 22. If they can distract you with killing, 20 some odd of them and they still get one or two through, they still consider themselves winning. So you never
That
lose
is
sight of
true.
that.
That
Oh,
is true.
yeah.
Yeah, I would love to know. I know that it's got to be somewhere, but I would love to know how much taxpayer money they've wasted
Oh,
in making these laws because they all just get challenged and struck down in court. Every
yeah.
one of them.
Oh,
Every one of them. So
crazy.
I'd be curious. I would love to sit down with you know, a classic fiscally conservative Republican and be like, "This is your party, bro. Like, how much of this money have they just wasted, thrown away? What are you saying? What?"
Mm.
Anyway,
But, well, no, I mean, this is all part of your story. So the work continues, and it sounds like even kind of surrounding that, the climate of the fight continues.
yes.
What else is going on in your world?
Well, for those that know, I do pastor an open and affirming church here in the state and in Gainesville, and it's good. It's hard, because that's not a complaint. It's hard because of it's the fruit that we've grown like intentionally in the United States. Like we mentioned it, a little bit before while we were talking that you have people that are wanting to pursue Christian spirituality, and if they leave that American evangelical system, they are either just done, right, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Let's just say that, name that, or they are just so harmed that you're just really reluctant. Like I don't even know if I can. Like I haven't made a decision. I just can't. And so to be a part of something where you're trying to create a not a different way because it's not different, it's not new. If anything, it's very ancient, but just pushed to the sidelines. But to try to have a space where there's a healthy way of practicing spirituality, particularly like a Christian spirituality, um, is difficult because there's just so much um, baggage, harm that come with people, and it makes it difficult. It's not it doesn't make it not worth it.
Mhm.
Uh, but there are moments where you look at, and I'm sure that there are many people that can resonate with this, whether they claim Christianity or not. But there are definite seasons in our culture where at times it's just like, I don't want my name attached to any of this,
Mm, mm,
any of it,
mm,
because y'all are ridiculous.
mm,
Y'all are just ridiculous. And if that's what it means to be, and I've said this before, but if that's what it means, then I'm out. Don't
mm.
call me that anymore. You know what I mean? Like I
No,
don't want to sound bitter or angry or anything, but there are just moments where it's just like, oh my gosh, just shut up. Stop talking.
I can totally relate, and it's interesting, especially when it comes to race work. Just because this is the best example, is there's times where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe. But it's like there are also times when it's like, no, I'm putting we back into it because
Mm,
I can't separate myself from it, and or because until it's not an issue anymore, it has to be we. Like there has to be people like us staying in it who are going to ask the challenging questions
yep.
and be the, kind of the seed of a different way of thinking about it or looking at it and so forth. So I definitely hear
Yeah.
you. The trash has got to be taken out. It doesn't matter if somebody put a whole bunch of wet, heavy stuff into it. Like the bag still has to
That's
go,
a
right?
great metaphor. Yes.
Oh,
Great analogy.
God.
That's perfect. Yes.
But
Yeah. So a
what I
lot of
love
it feels
about
like
your
you're taking out the
podcast,
trash. Do
yeah,
what?
that's
Sorry.
what I was gonna say is what I love about your podcast, because I've been on your podcast and then I'm just
Uh,
looking at the timer and we're gonna wrap up. But I say this to promote your podcast and also to support what you just shared with us, which is what I love about your podcast is a lot of your episodes and a lot of your guests really do highlight exactly what you were saying, people who have been harmed by the church, right? And I think it's a great forum, and it's also a great example for us of how sometimes it's important to see and hear those stories and hear all of the ways that an institution or a church or what have you does harm, because that often gets swept under the rug. And sometimes we can't really land on how we want to be until we see how we don't want to be. And
yes.
so these stories on your podcast, these courageous guests on your podcast show the dark side of things very often. And it's hard to look at and it's hard to hear and it's hard to actually kind of accept. But sometimes you have to see that to recognize that it's like, even though it's never happened to me, this is what the institution that I believe in is capable of. And
People
how do I
doing.
want to be with that?
Yeah, I think for us, especially that side of things, like one of the things that we're really leaning into is, well, I don't know if I said it on our episode or not, but one of my favorite quotes of all time is Richard Rohr, who is a Christian mystic and monk, said, "All great spirituality is what we do with our pain. We either transmit it or we transform it." And so for us, it is very much okay. Well, how do we transform those things that we carry with us? And if for people that, like, I met with somebody just the other day and we sat and talked for, I don't know, an hour and a half, and if our expression of Christianity is helpful in doing that, then great. But if it's not, then find something that is helpful,
Mm,
right? So that you can heal and that you can live in a healthy way, so that you can take that pain and you can transform it, right? So taking our wounds and creating sacred wounds that bring healing not only to us but to other people. So that's kind of, I think if you'd have to wrap us up, I mean, I think that's what we're really leaning into, is because there's just, like you said, there is so much dark, and it's like, how long can we just stand here and scream at that dark before we strike a match or something, you know?
mm,
So I think for us, we're really trying to lean into that transformative side of spirituality, of healing, God, universe, community, however you want to word that. But
mm.
I think that's where we're at.
Inviting people in versus pushing people out. I mean, that's really what a lot of the
Truly inviting people in.
being
Yeah.
afraid of other people, creating walls, barriers, and yet all we're doing is separating ourselves, So
Yep.
Oh my gosh, you and I mean, episode 38, people will know, people will see, but so much we could talk about, but I definitely invite folks to go back and listen to episode 38 or listen to it again. Because so what I love about the stories that you all share on the podcast is that they're not just relevant when you tell them. You can go back and listen to them again, and they reinforce themselves, or they reframe themselves in new contexts or with new developments and events. So Joe, thank you for being on.
Yeah.
I was going to say being on the show, definitely being on the show, episode 38, being on here to come back and check in with us. Is
Yes.
it okay with you? I put your original contact
Yep.
information in this description.
Absolutely. That's
So
perfect.
you're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and of course, the Shift Happens podcast.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Nice. Well, thanks for coming back and telling us what you're
It
up
was good to hang out. It was really good to hang out. It's always good to talk.
for sure. We'll see you again in the future. And I will obviously be talking to you more off the mic. Have a great week.
Thanks. You too.